Next up is Peter Lidiak, and I've known Peter for quite a long time too. It's kind of interesting because as I grew out of being an angry citizen that used to show up and rant and rave at these things, and I still rant and rave sometimes, and you might hear me yet today, but we've got to know a lot of these people. So I would say people like Peter. I actually was out to dinner with Peter last night and with people from PHMSA. I've been known to drink beer with Jeff Weiss, who is in charge of the PHMSA. What's that? Actual beer, yeah. Sometimes actually 2 or 3 beers. And as you get to know these people, you really can have in-depth conversations with them and learn, what drives them towards pipeline safety too. Anyway, Peter is in charge of the American Petroleum Institute's pipeline segment covering federal and state activities related to hazardous liquid pipelines. He's been with API since April of 2000, working on environmental fuel refining and pipeline issues. Prior to joining API, Peter worked in the Office of Transportation and Air Quality for US EPA for 15 years and graduated from Colgate University. So, Mr. Lidiak.
Yeah, I think I better cut that bio down a little bit. I want to thank Carl and I want to thank Mayor Becker for inviting me to be here today. One of the things, Carl and I were actually on a panel yesterday at the NACE conference that's in town here. Those are all the corrosion engineers that work in the industry. And one of the things that I observed, and I'll observe again here today, is that I think that the regulators, the public, the industry have really the same goals here. No one wants to have a release. They don't want to have someone get hurt. So we are trying to work for the same ends. We don't always agree on what the route is to get there, but I want to let you know that at least at the national level, we're trying to do a better job of bringing that whole public interest together. And that'll be a main theme throughout my presentation. API works primarily with the oil and liquid products operators in the U.S., not the gas pipeline operators. So my perspective is going to be very much from one of the oil, gasoline, diesel, jet fuel pipeline operators, and that's who I'm representing here today. Make sure we get the right one. You saw the map that Chris put up, which had literally all of the interstate gas and liquid pipelines. So this is a little simpler. These are the major crude oil and product pipelines that go through the United States. This network delivers crude oil basically from the production areas and from the ports to the refineries, and then it delivers liquid products from those refineries into the market areas across the country. And it brings those products to your communities in as safe and efficient manner as possible. Imagine the thought of having, a bunch of trucks rolling across the highways delivering these products and the number of trucks it would take. Really, when it comes down to it, pipelines are the only way to do it, and we try to do that, safely, efficiently. These pipelines do operate 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, all the way throughout the year. So they're moving these products all the time. As far as the numbers that go, Chris put up some numbers, which I think are the 2009 numbers. We've had some growth in mileage, but we have about 182,000 miles of liquid pipelines in this country. About 55,000 of them are crude oil lines. 65 are refined product lines, and again, that's gasoline, diesel, jet fuel, heating oil, the things that we use day to day. And then 58,000 are carrying high volatile liquids. Highly volatile liquids are things like LPG and natural gas liquids and ammonia and ethane. Those are things that we use for for lighting up the barbecue and for industrial processes and whatnot. And then there are about 4,000 miles of carbon dioxide pipelines. And you might think to yourself, well, geez, carbon dioxide is a gas. What's it doing in a liquid pipeline? Well, what they do is they compress it and they cool it down to a point where it's supercritical and it's moved as a liquid. So those are the lines that we're looking at. There are new pipelines being built all over the place. I mean, you'll see with all of the new production areas that have come up in the U.S., we're seeing new pipelines being built, both gas and liquid. Really, the crude oil lines are coming from new production areas into the U.S., and they're really they're opening up new sources of supply, really, for our refineries to produce the products that go into the products lines. So pipelines are safe, and they're getting safer. That doesn't mean that we don't have a long way to go to get to zero. We're trying to get to zero, but the numbers, as we've looked at, are small as far as frequency. We're trying to get better. Operators have dedicated fairly significant resources to ensure the safety of their systems over just the last few years, and certainly over the last 10 years, there's been a big emphasis on integrity management. The industry does track its safety and spill performance using a system that we call the Pipeline Performance Tracking System. This is, again, for liquid systems. We collect data from about 85% of the industry, and as far as pipeline miles go, we do think that's pretty representative of our industry. It's not 100%, but what we want to do is we want to learn from the information we're collecting. Over the last 11 years, there have been significant reductions in the number of spills and the volumes released from all the liquid petroleum pipelines. And over that same period of time, the number of crude pipeline releases have come down as well, and I'll give you some indication of that. Recently, obviously, there have been some concerns about certain types of crudes coming into the United States from Canada. And, we referred to the bitumen. Diluted bitumen and processed bitumen is moved by pipeline into this country. It has been for about 30 years or so. And one of the things we see when we look at the movement of that type of crude through pipelines is that it's been suggested there are some corrosion concerns with it. And we went back and looked at some data and actually looked at how much internal corrosion is happening in lines moving this diluted bitumen, and haven't seen any corrosion-related releases. So DOT is going to take a closer look at this. They're going to produce a report on this. We think we know what it's going to say, but we want the science to speak, and so we're looking forward to having that report come forward. Corrosion-related releases, which are the most common types of releases in crude pipelines, in this 11-year period we've been collecting data since 1999, are down by about 76%. We think that's largely due to integrity management that we've been doing over that time period, where we've run the smart pigs, the robotic tools in effect that go through the pipelines that detect anomalies, allow the operator to get to those anomalies and repair them. We think that's the main reason why these reductions have occurred. Other areas that have been impacted by integrity management and other safety programs, we've seen that equipment failures are down by about 34%. We also see that weld failures are down by about 21% over that time period. And we very much realize that incidents are still happening, that there's more work to do. Accidents that happen, incidents, near misses, all these things we look at are not things that the operators want to have happen. And we're learning from the things that do and trying to avoid those same types of accidents over time. We do work with our regulators, both at the federal and the state level, with our oversight agencies like NTSB, to do investigations and learn from what happened in those accidents. Liquid operators, and this is all cut off, I guess, liquid operators do assess many more miles than required by the regulations. When we look at the regulations, they require that we do certain things when we're planning for construction, when we're actually doing the construction, for operations, for maintenance and repair, for training our personnel, for mitigating corrosion, for reporting. Those are all parts of the regulation that apply to every pipeline. And then there are some pipelines, about 44% of the liquid lines, that are in a situation where they could affect a high consequence area. And for those lines, there's an added layer of regulation that's known as integrity management. And integrity management plans apply in those areas where operators have to assess and repair anomalies that they find. What we did in 2010 was we said, well, geez, what are our members doing outside of the HCAs for those segments that don't impact HCA miles? And when we looked at this survey, we had about 14 companies that responded to it that represented a little over half of the total liquid miles. And we found out that, that when we look at their data, they were assessing about 90% of all their miles, which is pretty comforting. They're not just limiting their assessments to the HCA could affect segments. They're looking at 90% with some form of assessment. Now, this is not necessarily the Smart Pig assessment. Smart Pigs are used on about 80% of the lines with just Smart Pig assessment. But we also use pressure testing, and we also use something that's called direct assessment, which is it's another method for assessing damage. Direct assessment is not used in our liquid pipelines quite so much as on gas pipelines for various reasons, but between those three assessment methods, we're getting about a 90% coverage, and 83% of those non-HCA miles are actually being assessed at this point, and they're being 80% of those overall are being tested by Smart Pigs. That gives you a feeling about what we're doing. Liquid pipelines do strive to do more. Carl mentioned the Bellingham accident, and that was a seminal event for liquid lines because it was a gasoline pipeline. It made our industry stand up and say, well, geez, we have to do a better job. So one of the things that we did starting in 1999 was to create that database I mentioned earlier. And based on the premise that you can't improve on what you don't measure, we started collecting this spill response data. We were collecting data on spills of 5 gallons or more or any spill to a water source when the regulations really only required that spills of about 2,000 gallons or more be collected. Now, thankfully, the federal reporting has kind of caught up to that, and they use the same cutoff. And it's part of the reason why, Carl's slide, when he looked earlier, had a lot of those hazardous liquid releases, because we have a volume cutoff that the gas guys don't need to look at. And it's an appropriate cutoff because our products, our crude, our gas, gasoline, our other liquids, when they release into the environment can have a significant impact, as you all know who live in this area. So that's what we've done, and we use that information to learn and to produce advisories to the entire industry so that people can learn from the incidents that have happened before, hopefully avoid having those same kind of accidents. And later at the end of my presentation, I have a list of links you'll want to look at where we put those advisories for operators to look at, and they're there for our regulators and the public to look at as well. And they have basically some considerations that the operators should think about when they're looking at that particular type of topic. We also formed shortly after that a performance excellence team in our industry that's staffed by a number of very senior operating personnel that look at ways that, looking forward, we can improve our performance. And it's worked hard on things like excavation damage prevention. And one of the things that came out of our performance excellence team was this pipeline information exchange, which is a learning session for operators that have incidents and near misses. And they actually come to a session. We close the door so we don't have members of the press. We don't have the lawyers in the back of the room. They have a safe way where they can talk about what happened in their accidents. People can learn from that. They can hear about what happened leading up to the accident, what they found in the accident investigation, what they put in place to fix that. Again, with a thought that just because this accident happened, we don't need to see it happen again, and we're going to share that information across the industry. I mentioned here, we work hard on excavation damage, and I don't have it here. It's on my other coat that I've been wearing this week. But how many people here are familiar with 811? It's a good number, some not. But 811 is the national call before you dig number, and that's the number you want to call when you're getting set to do excavation or someone is getting set to do excavation on your behalf. You really ought to call the 811 number and get your area where you're going to excavate marked for underground utilities. So that's my pitch for 811. In April, we kick off Excavation Damage Prevention Month, and it really is a month to focus on as we get into the spring and everybody's getting ready to do their planting. We want people to call that. One of the things that we've looked at is we've got these safety issues that we've been addressing for 10 years, and I'm going to show you some data in just a short while. We wanted to figure out, the data has come down dramatically in 11 years, which is the good news. The bad news is things are kind of tailing off. We kind of feel like, well, maybe we've picked the low-hanging fruit, and we're trying to look for the next beneficial thing to do. Our executives that work with our association and also with the Association of Oil Pipeline that we work very closely with came up with 7 new safety initiatives that we started this last year to try to improve things that we're doing. On leak detection, our main focus there is to work to have a flawless recognition of ruptures and large releases. And really what we want to do is we want to work on recognition in the control room. We want to work on fast reporting to both the state, local, federal officials, and very quick response. Now that's an issue, of course, that hit the local situation here in Salt Lake City. It's an area that our industry is focused on because we realize that those large releases are the ones that we really get a lot of attention. We need to really focus on doing a better job there. Excavation damage. It's the leading cause of injury and death from liquid pipeline accidents. It's not the leading cause of accidents. It's only about 6 or 7% of the total accidents. We focus on that because it is the leading cause of injuries and death, and we've worked with operations like the Common Ground Alliance. I think Bob Kipp is going to be here tomorrow to talk a little bit. Common Ground Alliance has brought a bunch of underground utility operators, excavators, regulators, industry folks to really look at what are best excavation practices and to promote the use of this national one-call number that everybody can call before they dig. So that's something that we've been supporting over a long period of time. We're working on data integration now. That doesn't mean a lot generally to people that aren't risk experts, but what we're going to do there is we're looking across our membership so that people can learn from what other operators are doing as far as what are the threats they're looking for, how do they identify those threats, how do the threats work with one another, and how can we gather information so we have a better picture of what are the threats for the pipelines. That we think will increase our ability to detect these threats and deal with them before they become a problem. Industry learning and sharing practices, we have a group together. We've already done a lot of sharing. We've talked about industry learning that we try to do. But one of the problems we have is if we have like this group here today, well, if all of you go home and you don't talk to your neighbors and you don't talk to your friends and you don't share this information, the information doesn't get out farther. And what we want to try to do is expand what we do within the industry to get those learnings out to more people and get them out to the people that are coming in new, because if you didn't attend this workshop, you wouldn't hear what was being said here. And so we're trying to get that information out more broadly through different mechanisms. We're also trying to learn from other industries that have safety lessons to teach us, like the nuclear industry, like the airline industry, because they have programs that they've been using for several years that address how do we go at safety issues. Improving R&D and focusing our efforts more on the things that are the most important, putting more money on those things, and really pushing forward to get better results quicker. A lot of our research has looked at a broad range of things, and while all those things are important, we think we need to focus in a few areas of focus that will really lead to that kind of step change we're looking for. Strategic planning. I mean, everybody should be doing strategic planning, of course, and we do a good amount of that, but we want to improve our planning to make sure that we're focusing our efforts to get the best bang for our buck. And then finally, external communications. We want to talk to people and tell them what we're doing, of course. Here I am talking to you today. But we also want to hear back from other groups, from other stakeholders, what we could be doing better. And we're trying to put some mechanisms in place where we can do that. So we're working with groups. We're certainly meeting with our regulators regularly. We meet with NTSB regularly. We talk with our regional directors like Chris. We talk with the other trade associations. We talk with Carl's organization and other public interests. So we're really trying to reach out and get as much information as we can, and we're looking for ways to improve that. So those are our 7 initiatives, and what I'm going to do is just talk to you. There's this ANPRM that Chris mentioned on hazardous liquid pipeline safety, we have commented on that ANPRM and made a few suggestions. The first one really is based on the work we did on the assessments and non-HCAs. We realized that we're covering most of the liquid pipelines with assessments, but the requirement for repairs of especially immediate conditions, but any condition is, there's a whole number of conditions, but we think the immediate conditions are the real focus for all pipelines, because those are the most serious anomalies, the things that can really cause you a big problem. Since we're already looking at 90%, we think that the immediate repairs ought to be required everywhere, not just in the HCA segments. So we've commented on that. That's one suggestion we made to DOT. Another was that systems are usually assessed system-wide. You're not going to stop at the boundary of an HCA. So if you're already looking at a pipeline system, you're going to do a leak detection evaluation on the whole system, and we can extend those to systems that don't have HCAs near them. So on our regulated lines, we think that leak detection evaluations is a good step. And what those evaluations entail is identifying the technology and the measures we can take to do a better job detecting leaks. And then finally, updating HCAs every 10 years. The census data is updated every 10 years. We really think that that ought to be done regularly. Maybe every 10 years is too much of a resource drain. We've talked with PHMSA about this a little bit, and they're concerned about that. But we do think there's an opportunity to identify the riskiest areas where releases might occur. And finally, point out down here at the bottom, we have a standard out that is our guiding document for doing integrity management on liquid pipelines. We're updating that this year. We're going to come out with a new document this year that'll suggest a bunch of changes. We're not sure if DOT will adopt it, and they might take parts of it and use it, but it really is a guideline for operators to direct them. Yeah. So, all right, I'm getting the hook here soon. I'm going to go through a couple more things. I don't have more than a couple more slides here, so I'll get through them quick. These are the goals that we as an industry have adopted over this last 11 years and what we've been working towards, and that is no fatalities, no injuries, no releases, and reliable service. We do seek continuous improvement across the industry. And we understand quite fully that operating pipelines in this country really is a privilege. It's not a right. And our operators are trying to do all they can to live up to the public expectations for safe, reliable, and efficient delivery of energy products. That's really what we're about. These goals are all agreed to by our members and the members of AOPL, the executives that run those pipeline companies, and they are core to our industry safety culture. I'm going to show you a little bit about the record. You've seen some of the DOT data that Carl put up, and I just put up these numbers. These are normalized per 1,000 miles, so it's normalized to the length of pipe. We started off in the first 3 years of collecting this data at about 2 incidents per 1,000 miles. And we've had a 60% reduction in that number to about 0.8 now in the last 3 years, including 2010. When you look at the volumes, we've had a 35% reduction overall. What's not so pleasing is that little bump in the end that I think that Chris pointed out earlier. We've had a lot of major liquids releases in the last few years. Yours here in Salt Lake is not the least of that. They have really contributed to increasing volumes in this last year. And believe me, as an industry, we're looking at it and figuring out how we can drive it down. It's not something we want to see. We want to see these trends continue down and to the right. That's really what we're looking for. When you look at the causes, again, our programs over the last 10 years, we started out with a large number of corrosion releases. And remember I said earlier, that's mostly associated with crude oil lines, and that's the truth. 132 incidents. Third-party excavation damage, that is by someone who's not associated with the pipeline operator in some way, was at 41, second leading cause. Then we had equipment failures, pipe material and seam weld failures. other types of incidents that kind of get lumped into that other category, operator error and natural forces. And natural forces are things like, lightning strikes and floods and hurricanes, the things that, and locusts and stuff like that, So here's where we are in the latest 3 years. We've got a 76% reduction in the corrosion releases, both internal and external. We have an almost 70% reduction in the third-party excavation, which is great. It means that our damage prevention programs are beginning to really take effect. 34% down in the equipment area, and then down in almost all the other areas except for natural forces, because we've had a bunch of those hurricanes that have really impacted pipelines in the south and going up the East Coast, and we've had other types of incidents that have led to natural force damage. One of the ones that I'll point out we're proud of is the operator error. We've had a 60% reduction. That's an area that the operator can affect and should affect, and we've been working on that particularly over the last several years. At any rate, that gives you a picture of what we're doing in the liquids industry. I put some links up here to help you find information. We have a Pipeline 101 website, has basic information. The API PPTS website. The middle very long link is where our pipeline policy documents are. AOPL's website, that's the Association of Oil Pipelines, and then DOT's website at the bottom there. I think these are all good sources of information. I hope you'll use them. Thanks for your attention, and I look forward to some discussion and questions. Sorry it took so long.